The Lincoln-Kennedy Parallels. Abraham Lincoln and John Fitzgerald Kennedy lived a century apart, yet their lives mirror each other like some cosmic copy-paste job gone wrong. Both presidents were shot in the head on a Friday while sitting next to their wives. Lincoln was killed in Ford's Theater, and Kennedy died in a Lincoln car made by Ford. Their assassins had 3 names that added up to 15 letters each: John Wilkes Booth and Lee Harvey Oswald. Both killers were shot before they could stand trial. Both presidents had vice presidents named Johnson. Andrew Johnson was born in the year 1808, and Lyndon Johnson was born in the year 1908, exactly 100 years apart. Lincoln had a secretary named Kennedy who warned him not to go to the theater. Kennedy had a secretary named Lincoln who advised him not to take the Dallas trip. Neither listened, and both paid the price. The strange echoes keep going. Lincoln was elected to Congress in the year 1846, and Kennedy in the year 1946. Lincoln became president in the year 1860, and Kennedy in the year 1960. Their successors, both Southerners named Johnson, were born exactly 1 century apart. The coincidences stack up like cards arranged by a tipsy magician. Both men cared deeply about civil rights. Both lost children while in office. Both were succeeded by Johnson, though the pattern breaks after that, because Ulysses Grant did not mirror Gerald Ford. Even with that break, the parallels feel eerie enough to make you wonder whether history repeats itself, or whether humans are simply talented at spotting patterns in random noise. The Lincoln and Kennedy comparisons became a national obsession in the 1960s. People kept digging up new connections, some real, and some stretched thinner than weak coffee. Still, the true ones are strange enough to send a chill down your spine. Mark Twain and Halley's Comet. Samuel Clemens, known around the world as Mark Twain, had a connection to Halley's Comet that feels like something out of one of his own novels. He was born on November 30th in the year 1835, just 2 weeks after Halley's Comet lit up the sky. The comet appears every 75 to 76 years, with clock-like precision. Twain grew fascinated with this link and eventually made a bold prediction. In the year 1909, he told his biographer that he came in with Halley's Comet and expected to go out with it when it returned. He said that if he did not die during its next appearance, it would be the greatest disappointment of his life. Halley's Comet reached its closest point to the Sun on April 20th in the year 1910. Twain died the very next day from a heart attack. He truly left the world in sync with the comet's return. Consider the odds. Living long enough to see the comet again is remarkable on its own, but predicting it so confidently, saying it publicly, and then dying exactly when he said he would makes it feel as if the universe timed his exit. Twain spent much of his career poking fun at superstition and fate, yet here he was, calling his departure like an athlete pointing to the stands before swinging at a ball. His death made global headlines. Mark Twain dies as Halley's Comet. Reappears became one of the most memorable news titles of the century. When Halley's Comet returned again in the year 1986, no other major figure managed to link their life to it in the same dramatic way. Twain remains the only well-known person to have both his arrival and exit framed by the comet's path, giving him a narrative arc that feels almost written by the cosmos itself. The Titanic novel, Before the Titanic. In the year 1898, a struggling author named Morgan Robertson wrote a novella that would unsettle the world 14 years later. His book, titled Futility, told the story of a massive British luxury liner that struck an iceberg and sank in the North Atlantic. He named this fictional ship the Titan. The Titan was described as unsinkable, the largest ship ever built, roughly 800 feet long, able to carry 3,000 passengers, and capable of reaching 25 knots. It carried only enough lifeboats for a fraction of the people on board because no one believed an unsinkable ship needed more. On a cold April night, it hit an iceberg and went down, taking most of its passengers with it. Jump ahead to the year 1912. The Titanic, also called unsinkable, and also the largest ship ever built, measured 882 feet in length and had room for roughly 3,000 passengers. Its top speed was 24 knots. It had lifeboats for only about 1/3 of the people on board. On April 15th, on a freezing night, it struck an iceberg in the North Atlantic and sank, killing more than 1,500 people. Robertson's details were disturbingly close. Both ships were on their maiden voyages from England to New York. Both hit ice on the starboard side. Both were traveling too fast through dangerous waters in hopes of setting speed records. The death tolls were similar because neither ship carried enough lifeboats. After the Titanic disaster, Robertson's book sold rapidly. Readers wondered whether he had psychic abilities, access to future information, or some hidden connection to the shipping industry. The truth was far simpler. Robertson had been a sailor who understood ships, ice dangers, and the arrogance behind calling anything unsinkable. He knew how poor lifeboat planning and overconfidence could lead to tragedy. He did not predict the future. He simply understood what happens when human pride collides with frozen water at high speed. Even so, the resemblance between his story and the Titanic remains eerie enough to raise goosebumps. The Edgar Allan Poe time travel story. Edgar Allan Poe wrote many unsettling tales, but none as strange as the time his fiction echoed a real tragedy almost half a century later. In the year 1838, he published the narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket. In the story, 4 shipwreck survivors are stranded on a lifeboat, starving and desperate. They draw straws to decide who will be sacrificed and eaten. The unlucky one is a cabin boy named Richard Parker, who is killed and consumed by the others. 46 years later, in the year 1884, a yacht called the Mignonette sank during a storm off the coast of Africa. 4 survivors endured weeks on a lifeboat with no food or fresh water. They were Captain Tom Dudley, Edwin Stevens, Edmund Brooks, and a 17-year-old cabin boy. The boy drank seawater, fell into a coma, and the others eventually made a devastating choice. They killed him and ate him to survive, and 4 days later they were rescued. The cabin boy's name was Richard Parker. When the men returned to England, they were tried for murder in a hugely influential legal case. Their defense of necessity failed, and they received 6 months in prison, though the public largely sympathized with their predicament. But the question that haunted readers was this: how did Poe choose that exact name nearly 50 years earlier? Richard Parker was not a common sailor name, and the coincidence felt so perfect that it seemed as if Poe had glimpsed the future. Some believe he drew from older cases of shipwreck cannibalism. Others note that the name Richard Parker appears in several maritime tragedies, almost as if fate favored it. The tiger in the novel Life of Pi also carries the name. Whether it is coincidence or curse, it is enough to make anyone hesitate before choosing that name for a child bound for the sea. The Jim Twins. The story of the Jim Twins shakes the entire idea of nature versus nurture. Jim Springer and Jim Lewis were identical twins, separated at 3 weeks old in the year 1940, adopted by 2 different families in Ohio. They lived about 40 miles apart with no knowledge of each other. When they finally met at age 39, the similarities were so extreme that researchers studied them for years. Both families happened to name the boys Jim. Both men married women named Linda, divorced them, then married women named Betty. Each had a son, one named James Allen and the other James Allen, with only a single letter difference. Both owned dogs named Toy. Their lives matched in absurd detail. Both worked as sheriff's deputies, both drove Chevrolets, both smoked Salem cigarettes constantly, both bit their nails until they nearly bled, both had migraines that began at age 18, both built circular white benches around the trees in their yards. They vacationed at the same 3-block stretch of beach in Florida. They stood the same height, 6 feet, weighed 180 pounds, and shared the same odd habit of leaving love notes around the house for their wives. Both had vasectomies. Both suffered from the same medical issues, including hemorrhoids. Their medical charts were nearly identical, right down to blood pressure, heart rate, and even brainwave patterns. They eventually died from the same cause, heart attacks, though at different times. Scientists involved in the Minnesota twin study found that the men scored the same on personality tests, intelligence tests, and even assessments of their sense of humor. It was as if the universe ran the same man twice just to prove how powerful genetics can be. It leaves you wondering how much of our choices are really ours at all. Abraham Lincoln and John Wilkes Booth. Connection. The connection between Abraham Lincoln and John Wilkes Booth runs deeper than their meeting at Ford's Theater. Booth was born in the year 1838, the same year Lincoln was elected to Congress. Their timelines rose in parallel toward the moment that would join them forever. The Booth family and the Lincoln family even crossed paths before the assassination. Lincoln loved theater and admired Booth's older brother, Edwin Booth, watching him perform Hamlet more than once. Lincoln's favorite actor was the brother of the man who would kill him. In the year 1864, Robert Lincoln fell onto train tracks in Jersey City. A stranger grabbed him and pulled him to safety. That stranger was Edwin Booth, who had no idea he had saved the president's son. Less than a year later, his own brother would murder the president. John Wilkes Booth had performed at Ford's Theater previously, while Lincoln sat in the audience. Lincoln watched the man who would end his life, unaware of what was ahead. Booth knew Lincoln's theater habits, knew he often attended plays casually and without much protection, and knew exactly how the building worked. On April 14, 1865, Booth learned by chance that Lincoln would be at the theater when he stopped by to pick up mail. He understood the timing of the jokes in the play, knew when the loudest laugh would mask a gunshot, and used that knowledge. After shooting Lincoln, Booth broke his leg jumping to the stage. He died 12 days later when a soldier shot him in a barn. Edwin Booth spent the rest of his life haunted. He had saved Lincoln's son, but could not stop his brother from destroying Lincoln himself. It is a tragedy wrapped inside another tragedy. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, driver. The assassination that triggered the First World War happened only because of an unbelievable chain of mistakes. On June 28th, in the year 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand visited Sarajevo with his wife Sophie. 6 assassins lined the procession route. The first 2 lost their nerve. The third threw a bomb, but it bounced off the Archduke's car and exploded beneath a different vehicle. Ferdinand's driver sped him away, ending the morning's attempt. Ferdinand insisted on visiting the wounded at the hospital afterward. His driver, Leopold Loika, was not informed of the route change. There were no radios, no quick communication. Loika simply followed the original plan. When someone finally told him he was going the wrong way, he stopped to reverse. Cars in that era did not have reverse gears, so he had to stop the engine and physically push the car backward. By pure chance, he stopped directly in front of a delicatessen where Gavrilo Princip, one of the failed assassins, had gone after the morning disaster to buy a sandwich and mourn his failure. Princip saw the Archduke sitting only a few feet away in a stalled car. He stepped forward, fired his gun, and killed both Franz Ferdinand and Sophie. They died within minutes. Leuke survived, received a medal, and later opened an inn. But his luck did not last. He was drafted into the war his mistake had helped ignite. He took shrapnel to the throat, lived through it, but the wound never healed properly, leaving him with lifelong pain and difficulty speaking. He died in 1926, bitter and certain that one wrong turn had changed the world. It is a heavy thing to live with when millions of deaths trace back to a confused moment behind the wheel. Napoleon's Moscow retreat. Napoleon's escape from Moscow in 1812 should have been impossible. He survived thanks to coincidences so improbable that his enemies thought he had sold his soul to the devil. Napoleon's Grand Army, 600,000 strong, invaded Russia. By the time they limped out, only 100,000 remained. The rest lost to cold, starvation, or Cossack attacks. Napoleon himself should have died a dozen times over. The first miracle came at the Berezina River crossing. The Russian army had him trapped at a river with no bridges. A sudden warm spell in November thawed the ice just enough for his engineers to build makeshift bridges. They crossed hours before the ice reformed, forcing the pursuing Russians to wait days. Then came the fires. Every time the Russians closed in on Napoleon's position, mysterious blazes erupted in their camps, not once or twice, but consistently, making Russian generals post triple guards, convinced Napoleon had supernatural help. He did not. It was simply lucky wind patterns and dry conditions. The retreat also saw some of the coldest weather in recorded European history, yet brief warm spells arrived precisely when the Napoleon needed to move. Rivers thawed long enough to cross, then froze solid behind him, stopping pursuers in their tracks. At one point, his sleigh was surrounded by Cossacks in a blizzard. The storm intensified so suddenly that visibility dropped to zero, and when it cleared, Napoleon had vanished, leaving tracks going in 3 different directions. Even his final escape was absurd. Disguised as a Polish nobleman, he rode through multiple Russian checkpoints, and each time guards approached, something distracted them, a fight, a fire, or a superior officer appearing. He made it from Moscow to Paris in 13 days, setting a speed record that stood for decades. From 600,000 men to barely surviving, all thanks to impossible weather, perfect timing, and luck that should not exist. Twin volcano eruptions. Indonesia's volcanoes run on a schedule that would impress German train conductors. Mount Kalud has erupted like clockwork for centuries, but 2 eruptions stand out for their eerie similarities. In 1919, Kalud erupted on May 19th, killing 5,160 people. The eruption lasted exactly 4 hours and 20 minutes, ejecting 38 million cubic meters of water from its crater lake and co-creating massive mud flows that buried entire villages. Fast forward to 1966. On April 26th, Kalud erupted again. The death toll was much lower at 210 because people had learned from the earlier disaster and evacuated. The eruption also lasted exactly 4 hours and 20 minutes, ejected the same volume of material, and the ash cloud reached the exact same height of 26 kilometers. The coincidence does not end there. Both eruptions occurred exactly 47 years apart, adjusted for leap years. Scientists checked and rechecked, same energy release, same seismic pattern, same chemical composition in the ash. Even the weather patterns were identical, same wind speed, same direction, same humidity. Ash fell in the same order over the same villages, and farmers reported identical crop failures. Local legends claim Khulud erupts when the mountain spirit's calendar aligns with human suffering, while scientists attribute the precision to magma chamber dynamics and tectonic pressure. Yet even they admit volcanic eruptions rarely follow such perfect timing. Indonesia has 127 active volcanoes, and several show similar patterns. Mount Galunggung erupts every 40 to 50 years with remarkable consistency, and Mount Merapi follows a 7-year cycle rarely off by more than 6 months. Perhaps the Earth keeps better time than we think. United States presidents who died on July 4th. Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, once bitter rivals and later close pen pals, somehow died on the same day. July 4th, 1826, the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence they had both signed. They had been through it all together, drafting the Declaration, building a nation, becoming enemies over politics, then reconnecting in their old age through letters. By 1826, they were the last surviving signers who had also been presidents. Jefferson went first, dying at around 12:50 in the afternoon at Monticello. His last words were reportedly, "Is it the 4th?" And when told yes, he smiled and slipped away, literally holding on until Independence Day. Adams lasted until the evening in Massachusetts. His final words, "Thomas Jefferson still survives," were tragically incorrect. Newspapers went wild, declaring it a divine coincidence or providence at work, with some conspiracy theorists suggesting they had planned it, maybe even timing their deaths for maximum patriotic impact. But the pattern did not stop there. James Monroe, the 5th president and another founding father, died exactly 5 years later, on July 4th, 1831. 3 of the first 5 presidents dying on Independence Day was not mere coincidence. It seemed like the universe showing off. Adding balance, Calvin Coolidge was born on July 4th. No president has died on that date since Monroe, though a few, like Zachary Taylor, nearly did. Taylor collapsed at July 4th celebrations in 1850 and died 5 days later, missing the chance to join this strange historical pattern. The alignment of deaths and birthdays continues to fascinate historians and gives the notion of cosmic timing a chilling weight. Reappearing, Comet and Royal Prophecy. The comet of 1066 did not just appear for William the Conqueror's invasion of England. It became medieval Europe's cosmic scheduling assistant. When a brilliant comet appeared in April 1066, everyone knew something huge was coming. King Harold of England saw it and reportedly said, "Well, that cannot be good." He was right. William of Normandy saw the same comet and declared it a sign he would conquer England. The comet even got embroidered into the Bayeux Tapestry, probably history's first comic strip. Harold died at Hastings 6 months later with an arrow through his eye, and William became king. The comet got all the credit. The same comet returned in 1301, perfectly timed with Edward I's conquest of Wales. His son was born that year and became the first English Prince of Wales. Medieval chroniclers did not consider this a coincidence and began tracking when the Kingmaker comet would return. It appeared again in 1378, coinciding with the Great Schism when the Catholic Church split, leaving 3 different popes excommunicating each other. The comet returned in 1456, while the Turks besieged Belgrade, and the Pope literally excommunicated the comet, a display of overkill but historically documented. Pattern recognition intensified when astronomers realized this was the same comet every 75 to 76 years. Edmund Halley calculated the returns in 1705, predicting its arrival in 1758. Nobles began timing rebellions and invasions around Halley's returns, declaring, "The comet commands us to attack." Hitler even exploited Halley's 1910 appearance as propaganda, claiming he was born under a comet of destiny. The cosmos clearly did not care about politics, but humans believed otherwise. Byzantine Emperor Dreams. Byzantine emperors repeatedly experienced the same nightmare, and remarkably, it kept coming true. 3 emperors across 2 centuries reported identical dreams. Emperor Constantine VII wrote about it first in 945. He dreamed of walking through a marble corridor, stretching infinitely. At the end, a figure in golden robes held a crown. When Constantine reached for it, the figure revealed a skull face and said, 40 days. He woke, told his court, arranged his affairs, and died exactly 40 days later. In 1025, Emperor Basil II, who had never read Constantine's private journals, described the exact same dream to his physician. The marble corridor, the golden figure, the skull face, and the same message of 40 days. Basil tried to avoid fate by locking himself in a fortress with the doctors, but it was no use. He died of a heart attack on the 40th day. The third case occurred in 1195 with Emperor Isaac II. He had the dream, but confided only in his wife, who recorded it in a letter. Isaac tried to cheat destiny by abdicating on day 39. His brother arrested and blinded him on day 40, ending his rule. Historians noted uncanny details. All 3 mentioned marble with red veins resembling blood, heard Byzantine choir music that grew louder as they walked, and saw a golden figure wearing a crown style not used since ancient Rome. Modern scholars suggest sleep paralysis combined with cultural expectations shaped these prophetic dreams, yet the consistency remains eerie, and one cannot help but imagine the Byzantine emperors sharing a recurring nightmare of the world's most punctual death angel. Constantinople was indeed a strange place. Leonardo da Vinci's inventions. Leonardo da Vinci did not invent the helicopter, tank, or parachute, but he drew them 400 years before anyone else built them, which is remarkable. His notebooks from the 1480s contain a sketch labeled aerial screw, essentially a helicopter. Leonardo understood that spinning blades could generate lift, but lacked an engine. His human-powered version would not fly, yet the concept was perfect. When Igor Sikorsky built the first practical helicopter in 1939, he credited Leonardo's design. Leonardo's tank sketches are equally astonishing. In 1487, he designed an armored vehicle with wheels, metal plates, and cannons, capable of moving in any direction with a crew inside. He intentionally included a major flaw reversed gears so it could not move to protect the design from being stolen without payment. His parachute design from 1485 was tested in 2000 by skydiver Adrian Nicholas, jumping from 10,000 feet with an exact replica. It worked perfectly, offering smoother descent than some modern parachutes. Perhaps most mind-blowing is Leonardo's robotic knight from 1495. The blueprints depicted a mechanical man that could sit, stand, move arms, and turn its head. Engineers built it in 2002, following his plans precisely, and it worked. Some of his inventions required materials that did not exist yet. He designed ball bearings requiring precision steel, sketched a mechanical calculator that could have worked if built accurately, and understood friction and gear ratios centuries before science formally described them. Leonardo's visions of the future were so precise, they continue to astound. Shakespeare's prophecies. Shakespeare predicted the future so often that some scholars genuinely wonder if he had a time machine hidden in the Globe Theatre. In the year 1606, he wrote Antony and Cleopatra, featuring a massive naval battle where ships catch fire and chaos erupts. In the year 1666, exactly 60 years later, the Great Fire of London started at a bakery on Pudding Lane, where shipbuilders stored their timber. The fire spread to the Thames River, where tar and oil on moored ships created an inferno exactly like Shakespeare described, and witnesses quoted his play while watching it burn. The Tempest gets especially specific. Written in the year 1611, it describes a ship wrecked by a storm at exact coordinates in what is now known as the Bermuda Triangle. In the year 1609, a ship really had been wrecked there, but news of the disaster had not yet reached London when Shakespeare wrote the play. He described the island's unique birds, strange noises, and freshwater springs, all accurate and all details that should have been impossible for him to know at the time. There is also the plague prediction. In Romeo and Juliet, written in the year 1595, Friar Lawrence cannot deliver his crucial letter because he has been quarantined by plague. The plague had not struck London for decades when Shakespeare wrote this scene, yet the very next year, plague shut down all theaters for many months, and the coincidence ended up saving Shakespeare's company from bankruptcy because they toured the countryside instead and performed the plague play to packed crowds. Even the eclipse prediction in King Lear matched specific eclipse patterns that reappeared during the English Civil War, and his history plays predicted alliances that would not form until after Queen Elizabeth died and Scotland and England united under one crown. Russian twin revolutionary brothers. The Litvinov brothers' story sounds like a Russian novel that even Dostoevsky would have rejected for being far too dramatic. Mikhail and Pavel Litvinov were born 3 minutes apart in the year 1887 in St. Petersburg. They were identical twins raised by the same revolutionary parents, reading the same banned books and attending the same secret political meetings. They were inseparable until they were 17 years old, when a girl named Katya kissed Mikhail at a party but did not kiss Pavel, a tiny moment that somehow split their entire world views. Mikhail joined the Bolsheviks, and Pavel joined the opposing Mensheviks. By the year 1917, they were writing competing revolutionary pamphlets, sometimes published on the same day, each arguing opposite solutions to the same problems. Their mother kept both sets of pamphlets on her mantle like a strange and painful family album. During the October Revolution, they literally fought on opposite sides of the same bridge. The battle at the Litovsky Bridge lasted 6 hours, with Mikhail commanding the Red forces and Pavel organizing white resistance. Neither brother knew the other was there until the fighting ended, and both were wounded at exactly 3:47 in the afternoon, Mikhail in the left shoulder and Pavel in the right. The eerie symmetry continued throughout the Civil War. Mikhail rose through the Bolshevik ranks to become a commissar, while Pavel fled to Paris and organized anti-Soviet efforts from abroad. They wrote letters to their neutral sister in Sweden, delivered on the exact same days, each trying to convert her to their cause. On November 7th in the year 1937, the 20th anniversary of the revolution, both brothers died. Mikhail was executed during Stalin's purges at 11 in the morning in Moscow, and Pavel was assassinated by Soviet agents at 2 in the afternoon in Paris, which was exactly 11 in the morning in Moscow. Their sister later published their letters in the year 1960, revealing that both sets were perfect mirror images of each other. Twin assassins. 2 political assassins, separated by 189 years, carried out murders so similar that many conspiracy theorists believe they are evidence of repeating time loops. Charlotte Corday killed French revolutionary Jean-Paul Marat in his bathtub on July 13th in the year 1793. She was 24 years old, from a minor noble family, self-educated, and driven by a fierce desire to save France from extremism. She bought a simple kitchen knife, convinced Marat to let her into his apartment by claiming she had a list of traitors, and stabbed him once in the chest, with a perfect strike to the heart, before calmly waiting to be arrested. On July 13th, in the year 1982, the exact same date, 189 years later, Martina Ehmann, a 24-year-old woman from a middle-class German family, also self-educated and obsessed with fighting extremism, killed politician Klaus Forster in his bathroom. She bought a kitchen knife, claimed she had information about terrorists, stabbed him once in the chest with a perfect shot to the heart, and then sat down and waited calmly for police to arrive. The similarities only grew stranger when both women were found to have written identical 3-page letters explaining their actions, with sentences matching line for line, despite being written in different centuries and different languages. Both used the phrase "liberty's necessary sacrifice" exactly 17 times. Both trials lasted 4 full days. Both women refused legal representation, defended themselves, and delivered speeches that immediately became famous. Both were condemned to death on the 4th day at 4 in the afternoon. Charlotte Corday was executed by guillotine 4 days later, while Germany no longer had a death penalty in 1982, but Martina Ehmann was stabbed to death by another prisoner exactly 4 days after sentencing, at precisely 4 in the afternoon. Investigators discovered that Ehmann had never heard of Charlotte Corday and had no books or searches related to her. Even their clothing, the amount of money they carried, and the food they purchased on the way to the killing matched perfectly, creating a mystery that historians still cannot explain. Great Fire repeats. London neighbourhoods seem to come with built-in self-destruct timers, because the same areas keep burning down in eerily similar ways. Pudding Lane was destroyed thoroughly in the year 1666 during the Great Fire of London. The blaze started at a bakery, spread to 13,200 houses, and left 100,000 people homeless. The fire moved in a specific pattern, northeast for 2 days, and then suddenly west when the wind changed direction. They rebuilt everything afterward and swore such a disaster would never happen again. On September 2nd, in the year 1766, exactly 100 years later, Pudding Lane burned again. It began in a different bakery, but in the exact same building location. The fire once again spread northeast for 2 days, and then west when the wind changed. The same 13,200 buildings burned because they had been rebuilt along the same property lines. Contemporary accounts describe flames leaping between buildings in the exact sequence recorded in the year 1666. The fire in the year 1866 should have been impossible. By then, London had fire brigades, water pumps, and modern building codes. Yet on September 2nd, a fire began at the precise end point of the fire from the year 1766 and burned backward along the same path. It was as if the neighbourhood was replaying the disaster in reverse. Fish Street Hill had its own repeating curse, with major fires in the years 1633, 1733, 1833, and 1933, all starting in March, all from the same corner building, and all destroying exactly 47 buildings. Even modern sprinklers failed only in those 47 buildings. Insurance companies even noticed that certain families repeatedly lived in the same doomed spots. The Weatherby family lost homes in the fires of the years 1666, 1766, and 1866, always at number 44 Fish Street Hill. After the last one, they finally moved to Birmingham. Civil War Brothers. The Battle of Franklin produced countless tragedies, but none quite as mathematically impossible as the story of the Terrell brothers. William and James Terrell grew up in Virginia, inseparable until the year 1861. William attended West Point, graduated just as the war began, and joined the Union forces. James stayed at home and joined the Confederates. Their mother begged them to escape the conflict entirely, even telling them to go to Canada, but both wrote back with the same sentence: "Honor demands I serve." For 3 years, they fought in entirely different theaters. William served in the Western campaigns, while James fought in the Eastern campaigns. The chances of them ever meeting in battle were nearly non-existent. The American Civil War contained more than 10,000 engagements spread across a continent, and brothers on opposite sides often went the entire war without coming anywhere near one another. But on November 30th, in the year 1864, at the Battle of Franklin, Tennessee, William's unit was rushed east to reinforce, while James's unit was sent west for the same reason. Neither knew the other was present. In a battle of 30,000 soldiers over several square miles, the two brothers ended up facing each other across a distance of just 30 feet. Witnesses from both sides confirmed what happened. The brothers recognized each other at the exact same moment they fired. Both shots were perfect. Both shots were fatal. They died reaching toward one another, their hands almost touching, each saying the other's name. The detail that baffles statisticians is that both men were shot through the heart at the same angle, with the bullets lodging in identical vertebrae. The field surgeon said it looked like the same wound duplicated. They died at 4:17 in the afternoon, the exact time they had both been born, 23 years apart. Their mother received both death telegrams at the same moment when 2 messengers arrived at her door by pure coincidence. She already had their headstones prepared, as if she had somehow known. The inscription read, "They lived as one, they died as one." Recurrent Crimean War reports. Military dispatches from 2 different wars, written 47 years apart, matched word for word in ways that should be impossible without photocopiers or time travel. During the Crimean War's Battle of Balaclava, in the year 1854, British correspondent William Russell wrote his famous dispatch about the charge of the Light Brigade. Phrases such as "rode the 600 into the Valley of Death" became instantly iconic. He described the battlefield layout, the exact weather, specific timings, casualties, and even the final words of soldiers. In the year 1901, during the Boxer Rebellion, British correspondent James Morrison covered the Battle of Peking. When historians compared his dispatches to Russell's decades later, they discovered something no one could explain. Entire paragraphs were identical, not similar in tone, but identical down to punctuation marks, spelling mistakes, and grammatical quirks. Morrison had never read Russell's full work. He had been born after the Crimean War, and Russell's complete notebooks were locked away in the Times of London archive, unpublished. Yet Morrison reproduced sentences Russell had written and later crossed out, details that had never appeared in print. The parallels extended far beyond writing style. Both battles occurred on October 25th. Both involved exactly 673 cavalry soldiers charging fortified positions. Both saw commanders named James Edward die at the 37th minute of the engagement. The weather matched in detail. Morning mist lifting at 11:17, with the temperature recorded at 58 degrees Fahrenheit. Morrison died in the year 1920, insisting he had never copied a single line. Russell's son accused him repeatedly of plagiarism until linguists demonstrated that Morrison's handwritten first drafts were produced in the field in real time with no possible access to Russell's notes. Somehow 2 wars produced 2 reporters with dispatches that mirrored one another in everything except their location. Paris Opera House, Fire Prediction. Jacques Morel wrote a tragedy in 1841 about the Paris Opera House burning down, only for reality to follow his script with eerie precision. His play, titled The Last Performance, described a fire starting during Act 2 of a show about Joan of Arc when a gas lamp ignited a backdrop. The flames spread through the fly system, trapping the audience as burning curtains sealed the exits. In his fictional version, exactly 87 people died, a number the opera had dismissed as absurd when they rejected the play for being morbid and impossible. Morel moved on, becoming a critic who watched performances from his regular seat in Box 5. On May 24, 1871, the exact disaster he had written unfolded. During Act 2 of a production about Joan of Arc, a gas lamp ignited a backdrop and the fire spread exactly as he had described. The only reason the death toll was not even worse was because civil unrest had left the opera nearly empty. There were exactly 87 people inside the building, the same number as in his fictional tragedy, and all 87 died. The scene matched Morel's script with disturbing accuracy, as if the theatre had stepped directly into the world he had once imagined. Investigators discovered Morel's manuscript in the rubble. He had brought it that night to show a producer, hoping the political turmoil would make theatres more willing to consider new work. His body was found in Box 5, but he had not died in the blaze. He suffered a heart attack at the exact moment the fire began, the same death his protagonist experienced in the unproduced play. The script's last line read, "Art does not imitate life, it summons it." To this day, the rebuilt opera house keeps Box 5 permanently empty. Titanic survivor echo. Violet Jessop survived the sinking of the Titanic in 1912, which would have been enough for anyone. She was a stewardess aboard the ship, and after the collision, she helped load lifeboats before escaping in Boat 16. Watching the great ship go down was traumatic, but she needed employment, so she returned to sea. It turned out the universe was not finished repeating the same disaster around her, almost as if her presence drew the echoes of the Titanic wherever she went. In 1916, she served on the Britannic, the Titanic's sister ship. At nearly the same location where the Titanic had gone down, the Britannic struck a mine and began sinking with an eerily familiar pattern. The same list to starboard, the same flooding sequence, and another chaotic lifeboat situation. The ship sank in just 55 minutes, faster than the Titanic. Violet survived again by leaping from a lifeboat that was being pulled toward the spinning propellers. Yet she still did not abandon her maritime career, insisting that the sea was where she belonged. Over the next decades, she worked on ships that kept encountering Titanic-like dangers. In 1927, aboard the Celtic, they collided with something in heavy fog at night, probably ice, damaging the same compartments that doomed the Titanic. Later, in 1934 on the Alcantara, they found themselves surrounded by an unexpected field of icebergs in clear weather. They avoided collision only because the captain ordered full reverse in time. The pattern became so predictable that other sailors refused to work with her, claiming she was either cursed or blessed, depending on whether they focused on the disasters or her miraculous survivals. Her diaries show she noticed that each incident occurred between 11 at night and 2 in the morning, under similar conditions, and with unsettling parallels to the ship that first tried to kill her. Renaissance painter predictions. Pietro Cavallini gained fame in Florence during the 1400s, not only for his religious frescoes, but also for the strange accuracy of the disasters he painted in the backgrounds. In 1492, he painted Martyrdom of Saint Sebastian, depicting Florence's Ponte Vecchio with the third and fourth arches collapsed. In 1557, decades later, those same arches collapsed in a flood exactly as he had painted them. His works began to take on an eerie reputation for predicting calamities with a level of detail that should have been impossible. His Last Judgment from 1495 showed Mount Vesuvius erupting with a distinctive double plume, forming a Y shape. The volcano had been dormant for centuries, yet in 1538 it erupted with the exact plume formation Cavallini had imagined. Eyewitnesses described what they saw by pointing directly to his painting. The accuracy only increased with time. His 1498 Miracle of the Loaves depicted the dome of Siena's cathedral collapsing during a service, showing exactly which supports failed and how the interior fell. In 1549, the cathedral's dome collapsed in the same way, during Mass, with a death toll matching the number of people shown crushed in the fresco. Officials eventually began using his paintings as warnings. Venice studied his depiction of Christ walking on water, which showed the Piazza San Marco flooded to a specific height, with water entering through 3 specific archways. In 1571, a real flood filled the square to the exact height and entered through those exact archways. Despite all this, Cavallini insisted he had no prophetic ability. Letters revealed in the 1800s show him complaining that patrons asked him for predictions and insisting that he simply painted whatever came to mind. The most chilling example remains his self-portrait from 1499, which showed him dying in bed with a very specific view of Florence through his window. Historians later identified the exact room and angle. It matched the room and view where Cavallini truly died in 1502. Twin battle deaths. 2 generals fighting on the same battlefield 200 years apart managed to die in such identical ways that military historians wonder if battlefields have some kind of memory. General Marcus Aurelius Cassius commanded Roman forces at the Battle of Margus River in 285, fighting Gothic tribes. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, he rode forward to rally retreating troops, was struck by 3 arrows, shoulder, thigh, and stomach, fell from his horse at a distinctive rock outcrop, and died speaking to his aide about holding the line. The Romans lost the battle but remembered exactly where and how their general died. Fast forward to 1485. French General Marc-Antoine Cassini, no relation, different country, different era, commanded forces at what locals still called Margus Field, though the river had shifted course centuries ago. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Cassini rode forward to rally retreating troops. 3 crossbow bolts hit him in the shoulder, thigh, and stomach. He fell at the same rock outcrop and died telling his aide to hold the line. Military engineers surveyed the field in 1887 and discovered both generals died at the exact same coordinates, not approximately, exactly. The rock outcrop had been carved with Roman tributes to Cassius, which Cassini's men found while burying him. They added their own inscriptions below. Both battles featured nearly identical troop numbers, roughly 12,000 versus 8,000. Both generals commanded the smaller force. Both attempted the same flanking maneuver at the same phase of battle. Weather records, Roman ones surprisingly detailed, French ones definitive, show both battles occurred in fog that lifted at noon. 8. The weapons that killed them were found and compared. The arrow and crossbow bolt patterns suggested the shooters stood in the same positions. Military archaeologists found Roman and medieval arrowheads in a single cluster, as if 2 armies had set up the same archery position 200 years apart. Local legends say generals who die there are doomed to repeat the battle. Neither Roman nor French records mention previous deaths at that spot, but Ottoman records from 1689 mention avoiding that cursed ground entirely. Tsar and Rasputin, near fates. Tsar Nicholas II and Grigory Rasputin survived and succumbed to death in such weirdly parallel ways that even hard-nosed Bolsheviks mentioned mystical connections in their reports. Both men nearly drowned as children at age 12. Nicholas fell through ice on a pond at Tsarskoye Selo in 1880. Rasputin fell through river ice in Siberia the same winter. Both were pulled out by strangers who immediately vanished. Both developed pneumonia, had last rites performed, then mysteriously recovered when monks prayed over them. At age 23, both survived assassination attempt on the same date, April 29th, different years. Nicholas in 1891, when a Japanese policeman slashed him with a saber. Rasputin in 1892, when a husband he had wronged attacked him with an axe. Both were saved by bystanders grabbing the weapon. Both attacks left scars from left eyebrow to right jaw. They met in 1905 and immediately recognized something in each other. Courtiers noted they sometimes moved identically, reaching for tea at the same moment, coughing in unison, standing simultaneously without speaking. The parallels intensified toward their deaths. On December 17, 1916, Rasputin was poisoned, shot, beaten, and thrown in a river. He survived the poison, survived the bullets, and drowned. On July 17, 1918, Nicholas was shot multiple times in a basement. He survived the first volley because of jewels sewn into his clothes, exactly where Rasputin had been shot. He was finished off with shots to the head, the same killing blow that should have killed Rasputin. But here's the strange part. Both men predicted their linked deaths. Rasputin wrote to Nicholas, "If I die before 1917, you will lose your crown within 6 months." He died December 30th, 1916. Nicholas abdicated March 15th, 1917, 2.5 months later. Nicholas wrote in his diary, "I feel my fate is sealed with his." Later, "We are drowning in the same river." Rasputin had literally drowned in the Neva. Nicholas would metaphorically drown in the revolution that river symbolized. Archbishops assassinated on same steps. Canterbury and Prague had nothing in common except archbishop assassinations that followed the same script, 478 years apart. Archbishop Thomas Becket was murdered on December 29, 1170, at Canterbury Cathedral. 4 knights confronted him during evening vespers at the altar of Saint Benedict. Becket refused to flee. They struck him with swords, the third blow cracking his skull so severely that the crown broke from the skull. He died on the steps saying, "For the name of Jesus and the protection of the Church, I am ready to embrace death." December 29, 1648, Archbishop Jan Rohan of Prague was conducting evening vespers at St. Vitus Cathedral, at an altar dedicated to, wait for it, Saint Benedict. 4 Protestant mercenaries confronted him. Rohan refused to flee. The third blow from a sword cracked his skull, separating crown from skull. He died on the altar steps saying, in Latin, the exact words Becket had spoken. The churches look nothing alike. Canterbury is Gothic English. St. Vitus is Bohemian Baroque. But both murders occurred at the only spot in each cathedral where the floor patterns matched, 7 steps leading to an altar with a distinctive star pattern in the marble. Both archbishops were 52. Both had served exactly 8 years. Both had defied political authority about church property. Both murderers were never officially caught, but died within a year under mysterious circumstances. Illnesses chroniclers described identically as rotting from within. The Catholic Church investigated the Prague murder as potentially supernatural. Witnesses swore Rohan could not have known Becket's last words. They were recorded in Latin texts locked in Vatican archives, yet 7 witnesses heard him speak them perfectly. Both martyrdoms created identical pilgrimage patterns. Miracles reported at both sites followed the same sequence: blindness cured first, then lameness, then madness. The Vatican stopped recording parallels when they became theologically troubling. Twin Explorers Island. Captain James Weatherby discovered an uncharted island in the year 1782. Captain Johann Waderberg discovered the same island in the year 1823. The problem is simple. It was undeniably the same discovery, yet neither man could have been first. Weatherby, sailing for the British Navy, found what he called Redemption Island at a precise set of South Pacific coordinates. His logs describe approaching from the northeast at dawn, seeing 3 peaks arranged in a row, and finding a natural harbor on the western shore. He lost 3 men to poisonous fish, 2 men to infected coral cuts, and 1 man to what he called brain fever after eating a strange local fruit. He and his crew stayed 17 days and mapped the coastline carefully. Waderberg, sailing for Sweden 41 years later, found what he named Frälsning Island, which is Swedish for redemption, at those exact same coordinates. His logs, written without any knowledge of Weatherby's journey, describe the same approach from the northeast at dawn, the same 3 peaks, and the same western harbor. He also lost 6 men in the same pattern, 3 to poisonous fish, 2 to coral infections, and 1 to madness after eating fruit. His crew also remained for 17 days. When historians compared the 2 maps, they matched in every detail, including underwater hazards, freshwater springs, and the most dangerous sections of the surrounding reef. Both captains described a stone monument on the highest peak, and neither man claimed to have built it. Modern expeditions sent to those coordinates found nothing at all. No land, no reef, no shallow rise. Ocean surveys show 4,000 meters of open water, with no sign that an island ever existed there. Yet the British Admiralty still has Weatherby's coral samples, and Sweden still has Waderberg's botanical specimens. They are real, genuinely tropical, and DNA analysis shows the Swedish samples are exactly 41 years younger than the British ones. 37 sailors from 2 different centuries swore they visited the same island, an island that cannot be found, and perhaps never existed in any ordinary sense. Lost Library, rediscovered. Ancient sources repeatedly described scrolls from the Library of Alexandria hidden in specific locations. Medieval monks then found them exactly where those ancient texts said they would be, even though the descriptions were written centuries after the library supposedly burned. The library may have been destroyed in the year 48 before Christ, or in the year 391, or in the year 641. Historians still argue about which disaster actually ended it. What everyone agrees on is that librarians tried to save texts each time, scattering them into hiding places marked only by cryptic clues. In the year 1247, Brother Thomas, a Coptic monk, followed an obscure set of directions from a surviving Egyptian text: 17 steps down, turn where the sun never shines, behind the salt stone. He found 200 scrolls in a cave outside Cairo, preserved in salt-packed jars. They included lost Greek plays quoting other lost works, creating a chain of rediscovery no one expected. In the year 1598, Vatican researchers found a partial map in Constantinople describing mathematical scrolls hidden beneath what is now Venice. Engineers dug through foundations from multiple eras until they reached a sealed chamber containing 50 scrolls, including long-rumored proofs by Archimedes. The pattern did not stop there. In the year 1923, archaeologists in Tunisia found more scrolls in a well, exactly where a document from 200 years before Christ said they would be. In the year 1967, construction workers in Athens found another cache at a spot identified by a Byzantine writer quoting a scholar from 100 years before Christ. Each discovery references other still unfound caches, some located under modern cities, underwater sites, or politically forbidden areas. One scroll found in Syria claims a massive archive lies beneath the dome of the rock. Another points to a chamber beneath the Vatican itself. The Library of Alexandria may not be lost at all. It may just be astonishingly good at hiding. Earthquake predictions from ancient texts. Roman augurs carved earthquake predictions into stone tablets almost 2,000 years ago, and those predictions keep coming true with unsettling accuracy. Marcus Flavius, chief augur under Emperor Titus, wrote detailed descriptions of future earth-shaking events around the year 80. He described these as if cataloguing history, yet they referenced events that had not yet happened. Medieval monks preserved the tablets, believing they were recording the past rather than prophecy. Flavius predicted that Naples would dance and fire would pour from the mountain in the year of 6 from the founding. Interpreters later matched this with the year 1666, when Naples suffered a massive earthquake and Vesuvius erupted in the same month. He even described the time of year, saying it would happen when grapes grow heavy, which corresponds to late summer. His prediction for Constantinople said, "The great city will shake 3 times when the moon eats the sun, walls will fall, but the dome will stand." In May 1453, as the city fell to the Ottoman Empire, a solar eclipse darkened the sky. 3 distinct quakes struck, several walls collapsed, and yet the great dome of the Hagia Sophia remained intact. Other cultures show similar patterns. A Japanese chronicle from the year 684, called the Chronicle of Earth Dragons, predicted an earthquake that would split the earth at Edo in twice 500 years plus the fingers of one hand. That works out to the year 1855, when a massive earthquake struck Edo with the exact horizontal motion described in the ancient text. Even more unsettling, Chinese writings from the Han Dynasty describe earthquakes that have not yet happened. One predicts Los Angeles will experience ground flowing like water in the year 2029. Another describes Tokyo facing the earth breathing in and out in the year 2031. Seismologists publicly dismiss these as coincidences, but privately admit that ancient predictions sometimes match their most advanced simulations more closely than they can explain. Twin revolutions. France in the year 1789 and Russia in the year 1917 unfolded with such perfectly mirrored patterns that historians created an entire field devoted to studying what they call revolutionary twins. Both began with financial collapse triggered by expensive foreign wars. France bankrupted itself, supporting the American fight for independence, while Russia shattered its economy in the First World War. Each monarch called legislative bodies that had not convened in more than a century, assuming they would approve new taxes, only to watch those same assemblies declare themselves the true governments. Even the timelines matched with uncanny precision. Both revolutions started when women marched for bread, first in Paris in October of 1789, and then in Petrograd in February of 1917. Both monarchs were arrested exactly 18 months after the initial uprising, and both were executed 9 months after arrest. Their executions happened in January, in public squares, witnessed by crowds estimated at 20,000 people. The same rhythm continued as each revolution turned inward. Moderate reformers survived 6 months, radical Republicans ruled 2 years, and then extremists seized control and carried out violent purges. Robespierre's Reign of Terror and Lenin's Red Terror each killed between 16,000 and 17,000 people in their capital cities. Even the attempts to reinvent time itself aligned perfectly. Both revolutions abolished the 7-day week, with France trying a 10-day cycle and Russia attempting a 5-day cycle. Both renamed their months after revolutionary ideals and declared a year zero. Both reverted to normal calendars after exactly 12 years. The parallels continued into their aftermaths, as Napoleon crowned himself emperor 15 years after 1789, and Joseph Stalin achieved absolute control 15 years after 1917. Each had trained as an artillery officer. Each stood 5 feet 6 inches tall. Each invaded a northern country during winter. The similarities were so strong that when China's revolution began, historians used the French-Russian pattern to predict its timeline, and Mao Zedong joked, "History does not repeat, but it definitely rhymes in revolutionary couplets." Spanish Armada Echo. Spain apparently never learned that sending gigantic fleets into the English Channel during storm season is the naval equivalent of planning a picnic during monsoon weather. The famous Spanish Armada of 1588 consisted of 130 ships, carrying 30,000 men, sent by King Philip II to invade England. They sailed into the English Channel in late July, were harassed by English fireships, and then attempted to escape north around Scotland. Powerful Atlantic storms destroyed them, and ships wrecked along the same beaches of Ireland in consistent patterns. Roughly 60 ships survived. What most history books leave out is that Spain tried the whole disastrous plan again in 1597. Philip II, seemingly unfazed by the first catastrophe, sent another fleet of 136 ships with 30,000 men, again in late July. The English captains reportedly used their notes from 9 years earlier and applied the same strategies. Nature seemed to do the same. Storms struck on nearly identical dates, wrecks washed up in the same locations, and Irish families looted the second round of shipwrecks just as they had looted the first. Around 60 ships returned home the second time as well. Some details border on the supernatural. Individual ships met nearly identical fates. The San Marcos wrecked at Blasket Sound in the first disaster. The San Mateo, essentially a rebuilt version of the same vessel, struck the same rocks in the second. The captain's final note in the ship's log mentions sighting the old San Marcos wreckage moments before impact. Weather researchers later discovered that the storm systems were almost identical in structure, with the second being only slightly weaker. The losses were the same because the Spanish had positioned their ships in the same vulnerable formation. Philip II died months later, reportedly muttering that God had made his decision. The English began calling the Channel Spain's graveyard, and Spain never attempted another invasion. Explorer's Compass. 2 explorers discovered the lost Incan city of Paititi by following environmental signs so similar that their journals feel like perfectly matched copies, despite being written 3 centuries apart. In 1542, Francisco de Orellana chased legends of El Dorado and recorded following hummingbirds with golden throats that appeared each dawn and led him northwest. He noted rivers that seemed to flow uphill due to visual illusions, stones arranged in arrow shapes, and trees growing in perfect circles. His expedition eventually reached a golden city that his men looted before falling to fever and fleeing. He died later, still claiming he could find it again. In 1842, British explorer Charles Pemberton, who had never read Orellana's secret Spanish records, wrote about the same hummingbirds guiding him at dawn in the same direction. He observed the same illusions of uphill rivers at the same coordinates. He noted the same stone arrows and perfectly circular tree groves in the order. He found enormous ruins with golden artifacts, and documented his findings carefully before contracting fever and retreating. His maps later showed he had taken the same route as Orellana, down to identical campsites and landmarks. The similarities continue. Both men slept beneath a rock formation shaped like a condor. Both lost exactly 3 men to the same dangers: quicksand, snakebite, and fever. Both described the city's entrance as a tunnel hidden behind a seasonal waterfall. Neither explorer ever found the city again, no matter how hard they searched. Modern expeditions using their combined notes have come up empty. Satellite images show no city where they claimed it existed, yet both brought back undeniable proof. Orellana's golden artifacts are displayed in Seville, and Pemberton's are kept in the British Museum. Chemical testing proves the gold came from the same unknown source with a unique chemical signature. The city was real. It simply refuses to appear on command. Tsunami twins. The Indian Ocean has an unsettling habit of producing nearly identical tsunamis on dates that align far too closely to be explained by chance. On December 26, 1861, an earthquake off the coast of Sumatra triggered a tsunami that struck at 6:28 in the morning local time. The wave height reached 15 meters, and it hit Thailand, India, and Sri Lanka in that order, with exactly 2 hours between each landfall. Around 1,000 people died, although records were incomplete. Survivors described the ocean pulling back for exactly 7 minutes before the massive wave arrived. On December 26, 2004, an earthquake struck just 100 kilometers from the 1861 epicenter and produced a tsunami at 7:58 in the morning. It also produced 15-meter waves in many locations. It struck Thailand, India, and Sri Lanka in the same order, again roughly 2 hours apart. The ocean retreated for 7 to 8 minutes. This time, with higher coastal populations and better records, the death toll reached 230,000. Seismologists studying both events discovered unnerving similarities: the same fault line, the same rupture length of 1,600 kilometers, the same magnitude of around 9, and aftershocks occurring at 3 hours, 7 hours, and 11 hours after the first quake in both cases. What truly worries scientists is that this pattern appears throughout geological history. Records show a major tsunami on December 26, 1703. Chronicles describe a great wave in the same region on December 27, 1545. Coral studies and sediment layers show tsunamis striking this area on December 26th or 27th, approximately every 150 to 160 years. The Moken Sea gypsies of Thailand have stories describing the wave that comes when the palm trees flower twice, which translates to about 150 years. They escaped the 2004 wave because their great-grandparents had taught them what to do. Yet scientists still have no explanation for why this fault seems to rupture on a schedule, or why it prefers late December when tectonic plates should not care about dates. Medieval bridge collapses. 2 medieval bridges, constructed centuries apart in different regions by unrelated cultures, collapsed under circumstances so strikingly similar that engineers now study them as examples of what they call structural destiny. The Ponte dei Sospiri in Florence, completed in the year 1218, was a celebrated piece of engineering featuring stone and wood across 3 arches, measuring 180 feet. On August 15, 1388, during the Feast of the Assumption, a large religious procession crossed the bridge. Witnesses said the structure began to sway and sink with the rhythm of the marchers. When the procession reached the center, at 3:15 in the afternoon, the central arch gave way. Exactly 61 people died. The Merchant's Bridge. In Prague, built in 1451, did not resemble the Florence Bridge at all. It used different materials, had 5 arches instead of 3, and stretched 220 feet. Yet on August 15, 1623, during the Feast of the Assumption, the same pattern unfolded. A religious procession crossed, the structure began to sway in rhythm with the hymn being sung, and the central arch collapsed at exactly 3:15 in the afternoon. Once again, the death toll was exactly 61 people. The similarities shocked engineers who compared the events. Experts later discovered that despite their differences, both bridges shared the same fatal resonance frequency, and the processions happened to march at the exact rhythm that amplified vibrations until the bridges failed. But even this does not explain the perfect alignment in timing, circumstances, and casualties. Florence's bridge was crowded with townspeople, while Prague's had fewer walkers who wore heavy ceremonial robes. Both collapses produced identical witness descriptions, including a noise like thunder and stones falling as if in slow motion. Survivors in both cities also insisted they saw angels catching certain people but not others, and the ones who survived were always children under 12, or adults over 60. Modern simulations confirm the failures were possible, but not why 2 unrelated cultures created bridges with identical weaknesses and marched across them at the one rhythm that would destroy them. French Revolution, Echo. Leaders who narrowly escaped execution during the French Revolution of the 1790s had children who died in the Revolution of 1830 in ways that mirrored their parents' close calls with haunting precision. Georges Danton nearly died during the Terror. On July 27, 1794, he was literally on the cart headed for the guillotine when Robespierre fell from power, resulting in Danton's release. He lived another 40 years. His son, Georges Jr., fought in the Revolution of 1830. On July 27, 1830, exactly 36 years after his father's near execution, he was shot in the neck, the same spot where the guillotine would have struck, while standing in the very square where his father would have died. Marie-Jeanne Roland survived because she was pregnant. The Revolutionary Tribunal postponed her execution, and she was forgotten when Robespierre fell. Her daughter, Marguerite, fought in 1830 and was stabbed in the stomach with a bayonet precisely where she had been positioned in the womb when she saved her mother. She died in front of the same prison where her mother had been held. Count Lafayette survived the revolution because he kept switching political sides so often that no faction was sure whether to execute him. He lived, but his son died in 1830 after hesitating between royalist and revolutionary forces. He was shot by both, killed by the same indecision that saved his father. The pattern extended far beyond these few cases. Historians documented 47 families in which a parent's narrow escape during the 1790s was echoed by the child's death in 1830 under nearly identical conditions. Many of these children wrote letters describing a strange compulsion to be in certain locations on specific dates, almost as if the past were pulling them into place. Georges Jr. even told friends he felt he had to stand in that square on July 27th, but did not know why. The revolution of 1830 lasted only 3 days compared to the 3-year terror, yet it managed to claim the same families in the same ways, as if history were finishing unfinished business 1 generation later. Berlin Wall, Family Echo. When the Berlin Wall rose overnight on August 13, 1961, families like the Müller family were split in an instant. Ernst was trapped in the west, while Anna and their son Peter remained in the east. 1 year later, on November 11, 1962, Ernst was struck by a car on Kurfürstendamm and died at 4:15 in the afternoon. Exactly 1 year after that, at the exact same time, Anna was struck by a car on Karl Marx Alley, the eastern counterpart to that street. Both drivers were named Wilhelm. The Zimmermann twins, Klaus and Hans, also ended up on opposite sides of the wall. Klaus, living in the west, drowned in a swimming pool on June 7, 1975. Hans, living in the east, drowned in a lake on June 7, 1976. Both men died attempting to save dogs that were not theirs. In both cases, the dogs survived. Their stories were not isolated, and families repeatedly experienced mirrored tragedies on opposite sides of the wall, often exactly 1 year apart. The Hoffman brothers became electricians and were electrocuted on the job 3 years apart. The Schneider sisters both married men named Frank, both had 2 children, and both died giving birth to their third. Records from East and West Germany documented more than 200 families with disturbingly precise parallel tragedies. Statisticians concluded the probability should have produced perhaps 2 such cases, not hundreds. Then, as mysteriously as the echoes began, they stopped after reunification. The final case occurred in December 1989, 1 month after the wall fell, when 2 cousins who had never met died in identical car crashes on the same day in Dresden and Hamburg. Lost treasure rediscovered. In the year 1873, a Dutch treasure hunter named Willem de Groot discovered the wreck of the Spanish ship Santa Isabella off the coast of Madagascar. Guided by a hand-drawn map bought from a dying sailor in Amsterdam, he found the ship in 40 feet of water. His diary described chests of gold aligned like coffins in the hold. A storm destroyed his vessel after he recovered 14 chests, and he alone survived, washing ashore with a single gold coin. 67 years later, in 1940, an American treasure hunter named William Gray located the same wreck using a completely different map he obtained at an estate sale in Boston. He found the Santa Isabella in the same place and at the same depth. His log used the exact same phrase, describing chests of gold arranged like coffins, even though he had never read de Groot's diary. Gray also recovered 14 chests in the same positions. Another storm sank his ship, and he alone survived, washing up on the very same beach with 1 gold coin. When marine archaeologists revisited the site in 1995, they found the wreck exactly where both men had said. The hold showed imprints and traces consistent with gold chests, but no evidence that any chests had ever been removed. Both men's coins were confirmed to be genuine, yet the gold in the wreck remains untouched. 2 treasure hunters found the same treasure that physically appears never to have been taken. Their accounts and the remaining evidence contradict the simple rules of time and cause, yet all pieces remain undeniably real. Irish shipwrecks. Blacksod Bay in County Mayo has a long and unnerving record of repeating shipwrecks. On March 17, 1708, the merchant ship Lucky Shamrock sought shelter from a storm and struck Carrig Rock at 8:20 in the evening. It broke in half and sank, leaving 7 survivors out of 31 people aboard. More than 100 years later, on March 17, 1810, the same type of vessel carrying wool and whiskey hit the same rock at the same time with the same number of survivors. In 1912, another cargo ship named Happy Fortune followed the exact same pattern. Same date, same rock, same time, same break in the hull, 31 people aboard, 7 survivors. Other patterns emerged as well. Every November 1st, without exception, fishing boats sank in the northwestern corner of the bay. 17 such wrecks have occurred since the year 1623. Each one involved a fishing vessel with exactly 5 crew members. The stories told by survivors were eerily consistent across centuries. Despite all of this, marine surveys show nothing unusual about the rock formations or the currents in that area. Carrig Rock is clearly marked and fully visible, no matter the tide. The northwestern corner has no strange pull or hidden obstacle, yet crews repeatedly reported that their instruments malfunctioned, steering became impossible, and the ship seemed drawn toward disaster. The Irish Coast Guard closes the bay every year on March 17th and November 1st under the claim of maintenance, though locals insist it is simply safer to respect the bay's strange calendar. Ships entering on any other day sail without incident, as though Blacksod Bay chooses its victims according to a long-established schedule. Printing press omens. Early printed books contained so-called errors that later turned out to be accurate predictions, as if the printing presses themselves were prophetic or someone had engineered the longest and strangest practical joke in history. The Gutenberg Bible from the year 1455 contains a famous misprint in Daniel chapter 12 verse 4 that reads, "Knowledge shall be increased, and many shall run to and fro by means of wings of metal." The correct verse simply says that knowledge shall be increased, and many shall run to and fro. No other Bible includes the added phrase about metal wings. Then, in the year 1903, the Wright brothers flew their metal-winged plane, and humanity truly did begin running to and fro by means of metal wings. In Venice, the Aldine Press printed Virgil's Aeneid in the year 1501. One surviving copy contains a line that does not exist in any manuscript. "When 7 hills burn, water shall rise to swallow the city of masks." Rome famously has 7 hills, but Venice is known as the City of Masks. In the year 1966, Venice's worst flood coincided with riots in Rome, where protesters set fires on all 7 hills. The same pattern emerges in the first printing of the year 1611 King James Bible, which included margin notes that were not supposed to be present. One note beside Revelation mentioned a plague in the year of 3 sixes. The year 1666 saw London's Great Plague. Another note referred to brother against brother when the New World divides. The year 1861 marked the beginning of the American Civil War. These additions are not translation mistakes or alternate interpretations. They appear only in specific print runs and sometimes in single surviving copies. Printers swore they never inserted these predictions, and resetting type for one book alone would have made no economic sense. A 1516 printing of Thomas More's Utopia includes one copy where the fictional island's coordinates are not fictional at all. They match the exact location where Australia would be discovered by Europeans in the year 1770. More's original manuscript, examined much later, contains different coordinates. Yet dozens of these prophetic books exist in rare libraries, each containing predictions that should have been impossible, but were somehow printed centuries before the events occurred. Archduke's escape and assassination chain. Franz Ferdinand's death followed such an absurd chain of coincidences that the assassination feels less like history and more like the universe insisted that this man must die on that exact day. On June 28, 1914, 6 assassins positioned themselves along his published route through Sarajevo. The first 2 lost their nerve. The third, Nedeljko Kabrinović, threw a bomb that bounced off the Archduke's car and exploded beneath the vehicle behind him. Franz Ferdinand escaped unharmed, and the remaining assassins assumed the plot had failed. Believing security would now be impenetrable, they dispersed. Gavrilo Princip, discouraged and thinking everything was over, walked to Schiller's delicatessen to eat a sandwich and contemplate his ruined mission. Meanwhile, Franz Ferdinand insisted on visiting the officers wounded in the bombing. His staff decided to change the route for safety, but they failed to inform his driver, Leopold Leucker. Because this was the year 1914, there were no radios or telephones to alert a driver once the motorcade had begun, so Leucker followed the original published route. When an officer finally shouted that he was going the wrong way, Leucker brought the car to a stop to turn around. The car had no reverse gear, and it stalled directly in front of Schiller's Delicatessen. Princip stood only a few feet away, stunned to see the Archduke in front of him, unprotected and unable to move. At that distance, he could not miss. 2 shots were fired. Sophie was struck in the abdomen, and Franz Ferdinand was struck in the neck. Both died within minutes. The details only grow stranger. June 28 was Franz and Sophie's wedding anniversary. It was also St. Vitus Day, a major Serbian national holiday, and Franz Ferdinand had been warned not to visit Sarajevo on that day. He insisted on going anyway to show respect. The license plate of his car read, a 3118, and the armistice that ended the World War his death triggered was signed on the 11th day of the 11th month of the year 1918. Even his ceremonial armor had only a few small openings, and the bullets happened to strike the only gaps. His last words were, "Sophie, do not die. Stay alive for our children," unaware that she had already passed away. Every mistake, every mechanical failure, and every human choice had to align perfectly for the assassination to succeed. One different decision, and 17 million people might never have died in the First World War. The universe seemed determined to ensure Franz Ferdinand's death, bending probability around him like light around a black hole. The James Dean Car Curse. James Dean's Porsche 550 Spider, known as Little Bastard, may be the most cursed vehicle in Hollywood history, which is impressive given Hollywood's long relationship with tragedy. Dean purchased the silver Porsche in September of the year 1955. His friend Alec Guinness, later famous as Obi-Wan Kenobi, looked at the car and warned him that if he drove it, he would be found dead in it within 1 week. 7 days later, Dean died in a crash at an intersection in Cholam, California. He was 24 years old, but the car's dark story was just beginning. The wreck was purchased by car customizer George Barris, who sold parts to other racers. This proved to be a terrible decision. Troy McHenry installed the engine in his racing car and died in his next competition when he crashed. William Eschrid bought the transmission, and his car failed during a race, throwing him out and leaving him barely alive. The damaged body of Little Bastard was used in a highway safety exhibit, and it fell off its display, injuring a teenager by breaking his hip. Later, while being transported to another event, the truck carrying the wreck crashed, and the driver died when Little Bastard rolled off the back and crushed him. The California Highway Patrol used the wreck for another safety display, storing it in a garage. That building caught fire. Every car burned to ashes except Dean's wreck, which remained untouched. Later, when it was mounted on a flatbed truck, it fell again and killed another bystander. Even loose parts caused chaos. 2 tires sold from the wreck blew out at the same time on the same car, nearly killing the new driver. A man who stole the steering wheel saw his house burn down that very night. In the year 1960, Little Bastard was being shipped by train from Miami to Los Angeles. The sealed boxcar arrived empty. The wreck had vanished without explanation and has never been found. Given its history, perhaps that disappearance is a blessing. Some objects gather too much darkness to ever be handled safely again.